What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing another ranking video, as you guys did seem to really enjoy the last one. And instead of the specialist, this time we're going to be ranking all 7 of the 2042 maps for Conquest. I'm going to be doing the breakthrough maps as well, probably this same time next week, as I feel completely different about some of these maps depending on the mode that I'm playing. And so yeah, I thought I'd better split those into 2 videos, otherwise it would be far too hard to rank them. And then in a few weeks from now, once I've gotten some good playtime with each weapon, I'm actually going to be ranking every single weapon in Battlefield 2042 as well. Before we get into it though, if you guys are new to the channel and you end up enjoying the video, then do consider subscribing and turning on those notifications so that you don't miss out on any upcoming Battlefield 2042 content. But with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. Now, we're going to be ranking these from worst to best once again, and keep in mind these rankings are based off the next gen versions of the map rather than the PS4 or Xbox One version. So yeah, just keep that in mind because that would once again change my rankings pretty dramatically. So anyway, coming in dead last we have Renewal, which is easily one of my favorite looking maps in the game, but unfortunately, at least for Conquest, I really am not the biggest fan of the layout of the map, and I feel like it plays pretty poorly on next gen. I'm not too sure exactly what it is about this map, but I feel like it doesn't really have any sort of flow to it at all. The wall through the middle kind of gets in the way a lot of the time, and the 2 bottom sectors are just so big even though no one really goes there, and yeah, it just doesn't feel all that great to me personally for Conquest, despite being one of my favorite maps in Breakthrough. I do think the last gen version is actually better, to be honest, but yeah, on next gen, Renewal does unfortunately come in last place for me. Moving on to number 6, we have Hourglass, and once again, this is one of the better looking maps in the game in my opinion, but unfortunately I'm just not a huge fan of it for Conquest, at least compared to the others anyway. It does have some good areas, don't get me wrong. Fighting over at this stadium on the far left of the map is actually a heap of fun, and I probably spend most of my time fighting over that area, but for me the map is just far too spread out in most areas, and because it's a literal desert, there are so many areas where there's just no cover at all, which can make it pretty frustrating as well, especially when you come across a vehicle. I think the map has some certain areas like the stadium or like the city area that are pretty fun to play in, so it's definitely not all bad per se, but yeah, for me it does still come in second last compared to all of the other maps in the game. Now, coming in at number 5, we have Manifest, and I'm really not too sure about this map. It has some really enjoyable areas to play in, and I do like the layout of the map, but something about it just doesn't work for me as well as the rest of the maps do, and it's one of those maps that I'm just never really that excited to play on. Unfortunately, a big part of that is to do with the performance of the game. I play on the Series X for the most part, and while the game generally runs really well, it kind of doesn't run very well on Manifest for some reason, and I tend to get quite a few dropped frames, which is obviously not a good thing. I think the map is a cool concept, and I do love that it's kind of a night map, so it does get a few brownie points for that, and just the different dynamic of close quarters as well as plenty of open areas, but yeah, it definitely isn't my favorite map by any means. Now, moving on to number 4, we have Breakaway, and I'll be honest, heading into the launch of this game, I pretty much assumed this was going to be my least favorite by a very long margin, but it turns out that I actually kind of like it. I'm really not a big fan of the sort of overly big vehicle dominated maps. I hated Hamada in Battlefield 5, I've hated a lot of the other big maps in the past games that kind of just feel like a running simulator, but honestly the area around the A sector and the B sector, which is the area with all the buildings and huts and then the oil rig, that area of the map is actually quite a bit of fun, and because it's close enough together, I don't even realize the map is way too big. When I just stick to those areas, I tend to have a lot of fun on this map. Honestly, it's definitely still way too big, but I think because I kind of just treat the top half like it doesn't exist, I tend to not worry too much about the size. So yeah, Breakaway is definitely a surprise to me in terms of how much I actually like it. Moving on to number 3, and to the surprise of many of you guys I'm sure, number 3 is actually Orbital. I feel like a lot of people don't really like this map because of the beta or just simply because it is somewhat weirdly laid out, but for me personally, I actually love this map a hell of a lot, and I think this will probably go down as one of the more memorable maps when this game is said and done. I tend to just hang around the B and D sectors up the top of the map, and there tends to be more than enough action around those areas that I find myself constantly in the midst of it, but then the C sector down the bottom is also so much fun to play out as well. It's definitely a little bit far away for my liking, but with Sundance you can pretty much fly there from the B tower, so yeah, the map is definitely not perfect and I do have some issues with it for sure, but overall I do still enjoy playing it on Orbital. Now, coming in at the number 2 spot, we have Kaleidoscope, and I absolutely love this map for Conquest. It's so small and bunched up compared to most of the other maps that I feel like you're always in the middle of the action, and I really like the mix of close range and long range areas, the mix of action on the ground as well as some solid verticality too, and yeah, overall I really like the layout of the map. It's also one of the better looking maps in the game in my opinion. However, one thing that I don't like about it is that it is perhaps a little bit too clean. This is meant to be a war zone in essentially the war to end all wars, and the city is in like pristine condition for the most part. Obviously there are buildings on fire in the distance and stuff, but within the playable central area, the map does just lack a little bit of soul in a way. So as much as I really do love the map, it is definitely not perfect either. Overall though, the gameplay on this map feels so enjoyable to me, and I love running around with a sniper trying to play a little bit more aggressively. So yeah, Kaleidoscope is definitely one of my favorites. Now finally coming in at my number 1 spot for the best Conquest map in 2042, we have Discarded. This map is so much fun to me, honestly. I love the layout for it so much, and I think the size is a big part of why I love it too. It's obviously still big compared to previous Battlefield games, but in this game it is a pretty small map, which makes it feel really action-packed, while also not being too vehicle dominant at the same time. The middle section of the map is so much fun to play on, especially with someone like Sundance. There is honestly nothing more enjoyable to me in this game than jumping off the side of the boat, floating back up about 50 to 100 meters away from where you jumped off originally, and essentially just popping up behind a bunch of enemies to take them out. It's so well designed for Sundance, and since Sundance is my favorite specialist, that definitely makes this map all that much better. I think if all the other maps were closer to Discarded in terms of just the amount of cover and the way that it feels much more infantry based, then people would probably enjoy all of the other maps a lot more than they currently do. Many of the maps in this game do feel really open and almost barren in some areas, so having a map like this with so much cover and so many different levels of verticality and different angles to fight from, it's easily the most enjoyable to me personally. I'm keen to hear what you guys think though, and how you guys would rank these maps for yourselves, so be sure to leave a comment down below and let us know your own rankings for Conquest, and then like I said, I'll be back next week with another ranking for the breakthrough maps instead. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. If you guys want to support the content that I make here on YouTube, then consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.